you shared so much within that answer. And I have a lot of stuff to pull from. I mean, to be completely honest, the first thing I wanted to ask about in response to that was you just left. I mean, who does that, right? Who just takes a leap of faith, that things are going to work out, yet you did it. And I guess I feel like I hear a lot of people, like your friend said, who talk about wanting to do something and wanting more in life and planning in life, but they never take that first step. And you did it. And so I guess, if you can remember, like, how did that make you feel, kind of just jumping in the fire and trying to swim? I guess that metaphor makes sense, jumping in the fire and trying to swim, but you get what I'm going. You get where I'm going.
I was like, well, I guess the fire went out because I'm in the water now, right? If I go there. But it's funny what you say, because I'm actually writing a book kind of unpacking some of these why. I get that question a lot. Why would you ever go? And of course, like I say, Kosovo was a pretty soft landing. But I've gotten that many times over the years when I've spoken publicly or been asked to speak about my work, especially coming back home to the States. And so it's funny you said about jumping in the water, because in some ways, I've had the confidence to challenge received wisdom or what I was told or authority from a very young age, not least of which I got myself into trouble by jumping in the water when I didn't know how to swim and nearly drowned in my cousin's backyard pool as a little girl. So let's just say that the lack of knowledge about a situation or the lack of technical expertise to swim has not stopped me from jumping in the water. Although fortunately my cousin was able to pull me out because I was absolutely drowning. So I don't recommend that necessarily per se, but I have to say that in some ways I was fortunate because I was raised quite sheltered, sort of in the country, no television. I mean, kind of rural, right? Real rural, and clueless in many ways. But I was also raised I come from 3 generations of clergy, 3 generations of nurses. My great-grandfather had been a missionary to Brazil. I mean, we still have his machete that he used to hack through, the jungles to get to remote villages and whatever you think of missionaries. And like I said, I am not a missionary and not about converting anyone. But certainly that legacy and those stories were with me from my earliest days. So, and I had a father that had taken a year out of university to study and started to teach English in Hong Kong and traveled and had adventures. And so grew up with stories and the encouragement that your life, the highest life you can live on is to give one of service and contribution. So I knew service was key. I knew I didn't want a typical life. I knew I wanted adventure and to see the world from my earliest days. But and then of course studying abroad, I can't encourage that enough. That we, especially in times when we're divided and frustrated, by so many dynamics across the planet, but in our own countries, getting out of your own backyard, getting out of your own town, getting across those borders, seeing how things can be different, and especially as an American, right on the cusp of the sort of the end of the Cold War. My first year in the UK, I had a German roommate, and the Berlin Wall had just come down. And, I kind of arrived with this notion, superficial ideas that America, the West, capitalism, democracy had won. And, even though I was quite young, and one of the most significant experiences, a threshold for me, was listening to this quote, West German, now in unified Germany, but roommate genuinely concerned about what unification meant and who are these people and what does it mean to our economy. And so in an era where I've seen my own country get quite nervous about immigration, it was so significant to have that in the back of my mind, that memory of actually Germany, went through its own challenges and unification was not some, sort of piece of cake. anyways, so I think that learning the nuance is, the answer is in nuance. And luckily I was able to learn that as a young sort of teenager, 18-year-old abroad. But I think it's more important even now, 30 years later, it couldn't be more important to realize that what we see is not necessarily what we should believe or repeat. We've got to flesh out the nuance.
You know, I want to make one quick statement, and then I'm going to go back to what you just said. You remind me earlier about I always tell people, fear is like fire, right? Fear is like fire. And what makes fire grow is oxygen, right? And so if you want to bring down a fire, you take out the oxygen and it will subside. And so what would be the oxygen for fear is time. The more time you give a fear, the greater it can grow, because you're going to keep thinking about every possible thing that could go wrong. And you're going to talk yourself into not doing anything. And, oh, this will happen, versus kind of just taking the step and jumping out there and trying it and figuring it out. And so it sounds like you didn't allow yourself to have that oxygen, to have that time to let those fears become too big, that would stop you forever. So you just took a step. And then it makes me think of, I think it was I'm reading a book right now called The Future is Faster Than You Know. And I'm not sure if it was Elon Musk or it was Steve Jobs or one of them. They said, if you're not embarrassed with your first product, you waited too long. You got to put something out there and grow. I tell people all the time, if you look at my YouTube page, the first video I have right now is this like really messed up video, actually. Me in this white shirt, stretched out white shirt, laying over the bed, kind of looking at the screen, talking about, some young lady contacted me out of nowhere saying I've been mentoring her for years via Facebook. I didn't even know it. And it was about unconscious mentoring. But that one step, I've been wanting to do videos for years, but I kept waiting. Oh, I'm not ready. And I just took the step and I'm like, oh, it's not that bad. And I kept going, getting better. And so it sounds like you one, didn't allow yourself to have the time to talk yourself out of it, but two, you took that step. You put out a product, you put yourself out there knowing that you weren't perfect, but that you would refine consistently. Is that what I heard?
Yes, and I think that's a great narrative for, I would say, two things that are critical that I learned. So one, learn how to manage fear. Because as I said, and we don't have to go into all the details, but every location I worked after Kosovo was successively more and more dangerous. And of course, I'm operating aid workers, to maintain humanitarian principles of impartiality, neutrality, independence. We operate, okay, I'm going to say in the traditional posture, maybe some things are starting to change, but unarmed. I mean, we can't defend our position, and that vulnerability, that's not a choice, that's up front, because we're working in war zones, we're working in places that are highly insecure. And so you do have to learn to manage fear. So one, I would say I could offer some thoughts on managing fear. And then the other would be risking trust, because as an aid worker, you are constantly risking trust in strangers. You're putting your life in the hands of strangers. Someone in Copenhagen says you can trust that the driver's going to be there when you land at midnight in Entebbe airport in Uganda, and he's not there. And so now what? And now GPS, mobile phone. I mean, it's different, but there's still going to be scenarios now that I didn't, and with technology, I didn't have, 15 years ago or so. But so learning to manage fear, but learning to risk trust, and taking that risk, absolutely make it calculated. I mean, when I had to choose which of these taxi drivers to trust, and going to a place I don't know, and I've never been in the country, and it's already midnight, and they know I'm vulnerable, because I was going to sleep in the airport, but the airport kicked me out because it closes. And so, you think carefully, and I quickly, thought of a criteria. Okay, if I have to defend myself, well, I'm probably still going to lose, but let me choose the man that maybe has the slightest build, that if I have maybe the best chance, if I have to, try to fend him off, because I don't know if I can trust him. The other thing I've borrowed this from working in highly traditional cultures. They read the eyes, and they will say, we read your soul and your integrity through your eyes. So they might be illiterate, but they might have a very sophisticated assessment of you and whether they can trust you. And so, yeah, I thought, well, choose the taxi driver with the kindest eyes. And so that's an example where, but the more you do that, and that evening into the morning hours turned out fine. And it's not to say things can't go wrong, but yeah, we do have to. Courage is a skill. It's a muscle to exercise. And just going back to the fear point, because I think that's a really critical one when we have so many reasons to be afraid. So much of what, let's say, some of the population has taken for granted is they're not able to take it for granted. And what does it mean to share power in space? There's just let alone, a virus that we're still trying to defeat. That managing fear, something I had to learn was managing the fear that keeps you alive, right? Listen to your gut instincts. And until you've put yourself into a place that's not comfortable, so growing a comfort with discomfort is key as well. And that you can do that starting at home. You don't have to get on a plane to, Baghdad tomorrow. But growing a comfort with discomfort, understanding like how I can, maybe it's a cold shower. I mean, I don't know, start small, turn off the electricity turn off your mobile phone. Come on, there's a lot of things you can do to get uncomfortable in this day and age without leaving your home. But, learning what is that fear that says, okay, don't go down that alley, stay this way. Pretend you're talking to someone on your phone because you think someone's following you. I don't know, you just listen to those instincts that keep you alive, for sure. But distinguish, that you take action, you move through that fear. The fear you have to be careful of is the fear that can start to become toxic. And that's what you're talking about, that can become, that you can paralyze yourself, or you start getting paranoid. And I would say, there was twice in my career, where I started to feel like I'm starting to live in fear. I'm starting to see, and my gut tells me that my situation is not, it's not an acceptable level of risk for me, and therefore I'm outside my what's acceptable to my internal radar. And so that's when you might need to get yourself out. So it's learning to, again, here we come. I think the theme is nuance, right? Managing the fear, I disaggregate. Is this a fear that keeps me alive? Take action, you should move forward. But is this something where I'm starting to just, and it can be the way, your manager or your director is treating you. I mean, whatever it is, if you're sinking into that, living in a state of fear, you're going to obscure your judgment and become a risk to yourself and to the people you lead.
I love this conversation so much. And I love that you pointed out that fear is kind of grown, it's nature. This idea that we have in the movies that there's just someone who's never taken any risk in their life, and then all of a sudden this one thing happened and they stood up and they saved the day. That doesn't happen in real life. We don't go from 0 to 100 in our courageousness. It maybe hypothetically someone's going to call me out and say, well, this one time this one person did this one thing. Yes, sure. That's not the majority of us. And so how you get there is by being very intentional with getting yourself out of your zone and allowing yourself to be a little more courageous every day, so you feel more comfortable in doing that. I love the intentionality that you spoke to about saying, I'm in the house right now. What can I do that can make me uncomfortable so I can be more comfortable with being uncomfortable?
Hello, everyone. This is Alex Tremble from GPS Leadership Solutions. And if you found this last interview to be awesome, spectacular, and actually you benefited from it, let me tell you, this is only the tip of the iceberg. Visit the AlexTrembleShow.com, information below in the description, And that's where you'll find the full uninterrupted interview. And I'm telling you, there's so much great content you'll hear from this past leader, as well as all the other leaders we've already interviewed. So remember, don't just look back, reach back. If there's someone who you think will benefit from this interview or any of the other interviews, make sure you share it with them. Click the like, click the subscribe. And as I always like to end all my sessions, stay strong, stay positive, and definitely stay moving.